So the last few weeks have been incredibly volatile as far as the business news. Question is, how has it affected the real estate market, or has it? Is this really just a civil war between the pro and anti-administration forces in the news, exaggerating every piece of information? And possibly is the real estate market just kind of humming along as it has been for a while? Well, that's my contention, but let's get into the details. I'm Bill Gross. This is my weekly real estate market update. We're going to get together and look at really what's happening in the market that the news isn't telling you. In fact, the news is trying to tell you the opposite to distract you, and I'll show you exactly why. So quick assessment of where we are in the market. As always, there's two parts to an economy. There's a supply and demand. Demand is determined by in real estate by the interest rates buyers will have to pay. And interest rates have just stayed a little bit below 7%. If you look at the chart for the past year, it's kind of the fat middle of where we've been. We've been a little higher. We've been lower for short periods of time, but overall, rates are where they are. Now, I think in the long run, they're going to come down with some of the changes, but for now, rates are sufficient that we still have multiple buyers. I have buyers calling on properties that are already under contract. So we have rates low enough to create demand given where we are today, which I think is good news and the most important thing. On the supply side, we look at the amount of houses that are available for sale, what we call in real estate inventory. And that's really unchanged. We get new numbers basically every month. And overall, we see that the market, the inventory is starting to go up a bit, still well below other than pandemic years. That's the key thing. Our economy in real estate still has not recovered from the 3 or 4 years of the pandemic period where less houses are built and less demand was made in the long run. And as a result, we have no ability for prices to drop. And we do have opportunity for prices to rise. So right now, the inventory is still tight. And overall, the housing market is not going to fall apart. Maybe in some markets, certain areas, or certain things are doing to make the market worse. But certainly nationally, numbers are pretty strong. Particularly in Los Angeles, we're still in a seller's market. Altos Market Research takes all the data and gives a number to it. And it looks like it went down from 39 to 38, but really went down from 38.55, round up to 39, down to 38.43. So really the market in LA has stayed to be about a slight seller's market where it's been for the most of ever since the COVID, it's been a seller's market, and certainly the last few months. So overall the market pretty flat into normal here in the Los Angeles market. And, I don't know what's going to change. We'll talk a little bit about the effect of the fires and the rebuilding effort, but I'm not sure that's really going to change things or not. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening in the Los Angeles market. And that's so funny. In the middle of this, I got logged out of one of the things I'm going to bring up and show you. So LA market, a couple things that are I would say are noteworthy. Let's see here. Not you, like, I don't believe this. Some of these programs are so, I don't know if you experienced this, the security is so intense that you just can't get the job done because they're constantly locking you out. Okay, here we go. One thing I wanted to show you was good news in LA. We had a high price sale for office space. Office space is reeling nationally. And this is one of the highest sales in LA in a long while. Now, it's in Silicon Beach, which is, if you don't know the area, on the way to Marina del Rey. It was a master plan development, beautiful area. Recommend you check it out. And this office building sold for $130 million, $413 per square foot. So phenomenal sale, Class A office space down by the beach. Now, let's say the good news is it's a great sale, great price, great comp. The troubling part is it's not downtown. The downtown market is still really struggling in LA, particularly office space. But perhaps, being in a newer, hipper, cooler by the ocean spot is where things are moving to. So it's also by the airport. So we'll see how that works out. Also in news in Los Angeles is as we're starting to, let's see, that was that. Where am I at here? I lost my spot there. Okay, well, I was showing an article about the retail market and how that is being affected by the ability to, here we go. I'm sorry about all this technology. People really torn Pacific Palisades property owners reckon with rebuilding realities. And this is an overview done by CoStar over what people's attitudes are in the Palisades market. And a couple things they confirm is that I keep hearing that while initially people were determined to rebuild and stay, as time's going on, more and more people are life is happening and they're deciding to move on. And so more and more, some of the people, not majority, not all of them for sure, but more and more people are starting to give up hope and decide either to buy somewhere else or move out of the area. If you look at the stats in this article, which I thought was fascinating, They're estimating 5,500 homes need to be rebuilt specifically in the Palisades area alone. And they say that there are 10 with homes approved now. There was 4 a couple weeks ago. And 100 on permitting, only 100. I'm surprised because I would think you'd want to get ahead of the curve if you could. Army Corps of Engineers is clearing 50 lots a day. So if you have 5,500, that's 100 days of clearing. So maybe next 3 or 4 months they'll be done clearing out all the lots. And the question is, how many are going to rebuild? But again, only 100 are even in the permit phase as of today. Seems to me for people who want to rebuild their own house, they're not jumping on it. Maybe they're going to wait and see what the options are. Maybe they're waiting to see if the neighbor gets rebuilt or not. Hard to tell. But definitely this process is taking a lot longer, I think, than people anticipated. Okay, also under the economy is not as bad as people make it out to be. One of the things you heard about, a big news story for the last year was the National Commission lawsuit. It was a group lawsuit where they went against all of the realtors involved in the MLS, and as a result, changed the way we pay buyer's agents in our industry. Dramatic change, most dramatic change in the process of selling real estate in my experience in the last 20 years. And the predictions that as a result of that, if buyers knew the commission the buyer's agents were getting, or if sellers had the choice to pay or not pay that, they would pay less. Well, the truth is not. The truth is, even though we're in a real estate market that you could call a depression in that we have 30% of the sales of 5 years ago, the numbers of units are way down, agent commissions have barely budged. And I said this at the time of the lawsuit, that this was all just ways for attorneys to make money, but the reality is, commissions are negotiable. They've always been negotiable. Of all the people in the transaction, the buyer's agents, they make next to nothing. They might show up a property to, a person, 10, 20 different properties, and they may never buy. There's no guarantee of ever getting paid. And they tend to be the lowest on the food chain. And so when real estate agents when attorneys and the real estate industry news focus on agents being overpaid and thought by breaking out the buyer's commission, it would change things. That's not happened. And the reason is the market is pretty wrung out of excess fat. It's a very competitive market. And so even in a slow economy, if you listen to the real estate news, you listen to the business news, real estate commissions really haven't changed much at all. So interesting news in the market. Here's another fake news story, CNBC, classic fake news. Homebuyer mortgage demand drops further as economic uncertainty roils the housing market. Roils the housing market. Everybody's roiled up. Not really true. I just showed you the numbers that showed that inventory is rising slightly, that buyer demand is staying about the same. You look at this story, but you go in the details, mortgage rates dropped from 6.9 to 6.89, 1/100th of a percent. 1/100th of a percent. A percent is 1/100th of one, so it's a small number. But even with all that, still they document that the number of people, the applications for purchase loans was only down 3% for the week. So it's not a dramatic change. It's certainly not roiling the market. And there could be other factors too, weather factors, and who knows what's going on. So again, I think the news is just desperate to sell bad news for a variety of reasons. Bad news sells, and I think politically these are people who all make a living by trashing the new administration and rather giving you the facts. And I would rather have the facts and make my own assessment. Speaking of the facts, Wall Street's a great source. Report on how great the jobs report was this past Friday. We had 177,000 new jobs, more than the average of 157,000, or we had an extra 20,000 new jobs created in April from March than we've been averaging. Better than that even is that's despite a decrease of 9,000 in the federal government. So you might have thought the federal government cutting jobs would cause problems. The reality is, while we lost 9,000 federal jobs, we had over 186,000 jobs created in the free market economy, which I think is good. Those of us who pay taxes more, those people who need our tax money to pay their bills less. So overall, really good news, I think, hidden. And that's why on Friday we had to turn around the stock market, because all the gloom and doom news turns out not to be reality, not to be based at least on the data, and not to be based on what's really going on. Okay, so we have this war going on amongst the major monopolies in the real estate industry. The 3 big monopolies to keep an eye on, 3 companies that are funded by Wall Street and don't make a profit that's taxable. They make everybody billions of dollars and invest in them, and they pay their executives millions of dollars, but they don't actually contribute to our society. The opposite, they destroy people who do. First one is Compass. And fascinating story this week in MarketWatch. So Compass has been the darling of the press because they're one of those Wall Street finance companies. But MarketWatch ran this story where a woman used Compass's secret marketing off-market program. They're Compass exclusive, which means we're going to hide the house from most people, and we're going to try to sell it amongst ourselves and make more commission dollars. Whether or not you make more as a seller is the last thing we're worried about. And it turns out they have a story in here about this woman who listed Compass exclusive. Actually, it went into escrow at a good price. But as happens when a buyer thinks they're the only ones bidding, they're very nervous and the buyer backed out. And they couldn't get the same price, so the customer canceled listing with Compass, relisted with somebody else in the MLS, had multiple offers, took one that was at basically the same price that they had sold before, but unlike the other one, this one closed. Why? Because the buyer realized that there was competition. And the lack of competition will make a buyer, will embolden a buyer to negotiate and ask for concessions and or reduce the price. And so that's one of the reasons why that Compass exclusive or any exclusive program. Look, there's cases where you want to have confidentiality, maybe 1 in a million sales. But as a general rule, the less people see your property, the lower price you're going to get. And I think this story in MarketWatch that really points out how I think Compass's exclusives really is a disservice to the customers at the end of the day. Speaking of disservice, now the other end of that battle, the people arguing the right thing for the wrong reason is another monopoly, Zillow. Now Zillow is such a corrupt organization that even when they're right, they're wrong. Here's a case, and I talked about this in detail last week. Even though they're right, Zillow, that all listings should go in the MLS for maximum exposure, or I should say almost all. So their reason is wrong because Zillow, just being the monopolist that it is, doesn't really ever persuade people or sell people. They just scare people and manipulate people into business. So the number one story they're promoting this week is a month old now. Privately listed homes disproportionately harm sellers of color. Now, I went through in detail last week how stupid that study was. And of course, even though it says in their study, if you want the data, ask for it, and I did ask for it, I'm never going to get it because they're never going to give you the data. The data would prove that their methodologies are, are vague. They're random. They're not worthy. They're not scientific. And so here's of all the things that Zillow could talk about to inform their customers. They could talk about mortgage borrowers getting a breather, meaning rates went down. They could talk about this case Schiller Price Index, that home prices slowed. That would be interesting to buyers and sellers. In cities where starter homes cost $1 million. All these are good stories that are newer than this story, but the one that Zillow wants to push not only lines their pockets, they need agents to have the listings online to sell them leads. Zillow needs that in order to continue to be the monopoly they want to be. But more importantly, because they have no experience actually educating customers properly, all they can do is scare people. They have to race bait. And do we really need more race baiting? I don't know. Aren't we done with this yet? Are we still... Do we really believe that people of color are hurt more often by not listing their house online than others? I don't know. How does that even work? And I looked at the data again. Look at last week's episode. I go into that detail. I just think the whole thing is just an attempt to push people's buttons and get them to click on Zillow and listen to the headline and not the real story. Okay, continuing on fake information. We talked about Compass being one of those. We talked about Zillow being one. Another one this week is Redfin. Now, Redfin was bought by another monopoly, by Rocket Mortgage, and their goal is to manipulate you. So you look at a house on Redfin, they're going to send the data to Rocket Mortgage. Magically, the mortgage guy is going to call you. You know, how that happened? How do you know he's buying a house? And the answer is they want to be like Google and Facebook. They want to be one of those creepy online companies that transfer your data. They don't sell it, but they transfer it to other divisions or some other stupid scheme like that. So Redfin's another one that has been basically a political entity. 95%, I documented this a few episodes ago, 95% of Redfin employees are Democrats. And so they've been a house organ for the Democratic Party in real estate most of their existence. And again, I guess if you disclose that, that's great. They don't. They try to pretend it's news. And I think what happens is when you're used to being political, you lose touch with real reality and real salesmanship and really helping customers understand. So here's an example what I mean by that. Redfin's top article of their news report, their survey, 24% of Americans are scrapping plans to make a major purchase like a home or car due to tariffs. Now, on how many levels is that stupid? Level one, 24% of Americans don't make a major plan, don't make a major purchase every year. Maybe 5 million homes are sold in a year, and maybe 15 million cars, that's 20, maybe 10 million cars in a year. So that's 15 million out of 300 million Americans. So it can't be 24% of Americans. It can't be 20% of adult Americans because, again, not everybody's planning to buy a house or a car in the current year. So that off the top. Second of all, they actually want you to believe that Americans are so into the news that they're watching the tariff war between the pro and anti-administration with such veracity that they're going to decide to buy a car or house based on that. Now think about that for a second. Either the news is a lot more powerful than it should be, maybe it is, but it makes no sense to me. I'm in real estate. I've never heard any customer say, I'm not going to buy a house because of the tariffs. I don't know where they're going to go up or down. Now, are there people who are losing their job because of this? Maybe they're not going to buy. Are there people who are whose business will improve as a result? Maybe they're going to buy. So I don't know. Does it work out that we know that more people are losing their jobs? 24% of Americans is obviously a ridiculous number. And then, of course, if you go into the details and you look through it, you're going to find that it's highly political. Here's an interesting story, a part of the survey. I already made a purchase. 8% of Americans, according to Redfin, already made a major purchase like a house or a car. Well, that can't be. This was done through April. 8% of Americans didn't make major purchases this year. That's not true. Now, people may have said that in their survey. And I will make a purchase sooner than I expect, 9%. Well, that sounds pretty good, actually. So, and then delaying a purchase, 32%. And of course, again, as a political thing, way more Democrats, Republicans. So again, I think that Redfin is always looking for fake information to scare people into clicking on Redfin. And more importantly, they have such a strong political bent that really is just clowning themselves. I'll give you another example. Redfin had another survey. 44% of home sellers are giving concessions to buyers just shy of the highest level on record. That sounds really scary. The problem is the highest level on record, according to Zillow, only goes back to 2019. So they only tracked this the year that COVID started, and which is obviously a weird period of time. And you look at their graph, you notice how much it changes. But a couple of things I always look at their graphs, it only goes from 20 to 50. That's done to compress the changes in the data to make it look more dramatic than it really is. So I took their data, just downloaded it, put it into an Excel spreadsheet, and it actually, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. It compresses the range to exaggerate the changes more, right? The change between 20 and 50 isn't that big, but when 20 and 50 is the whole graph, it looks bigger than it is. So when you take the data and put it on a 0 to 100% ratio, it doesn't look like it's changing all that much. What also you notice is, this is before COVID, the numbers are kind of coming back to about where they were. There were very low concessions during the COVID period when it was a strong seller's market after the first year. But that doesn't look nearly as dramatic, which is the real data on real form, versus this, which looks more dramatic. And so again, why would Redfin squeeze the data down, make it look more dramatic? To scare you. The other thing that's fascinating about this data that they didn't even discuss, for the first time in my career, we regularly have offers where the buyer is asking, in addition to any other concessions, is asking us for a concession to pay the buyer's agent commission. That's a result of the change in the lawsuit. As a result of the lawsuit, no longer can sellers' agents pay buyer's agents' commissions out of their commission. It has to come directly from the seller or directly from the buyer. And so most commonly now, the offers I get as a listing agent are asking us to pay what traditionally we paid the buyer's agent, 2%, 2.5%, 3%, something like that. Those are concessions that were not common before. This is on top of the normal concessions. So I would have thought that a graph of the concessions would show a dramatic spike coincidentally with the impact of this lawsuit, which was like last year, November. That's not the case at all. In fact, if anything, it's come down a little bit. So the real headline, if you're really in real estate, is concessions dropping dramatically, because even some of the concessions built in we should be discounting as an aberration. If you took those out, it would be dropping back. And by the way, if you go back a little further out, back to the normal numbers. So again, Redfin, bad on you, compressing the data to exaggerate it. And more importantly, I think, to try to exaggerate why it's going on rather than really analyzing the reason. And maybe it's just Redfin as a company doesn't really know the market. They're not real estate agents. They're internet data providers, I guess, or whatever you want to call what they do. So anyhow, what do you think? I think the news is constantly misleading and needs to be analyzed in detail, certainly in the real estate industry. What are your thoughts? Put them down. Give me a comment. Do you like this? Hit the like button. Subscribe if you like it. As always, I'm available. You can call, text, or email. And hope you like this content. I just want to give a quick shout out to my favorite uncle who passed away last week. I've been doing these emails and these videos for years. I've been doing it for, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 years. And every week, my Uncle Richard would write a response to me of some sort, sometimes just a quick sentence or a word or two. And as I got older, it was fewer words, but I would call him afterwards because it was really special. And there were weeks where the only comment I got was from him. And other weeks I got a lot more comments, but I always rely on him for some sort of a joke or comment or something. He passed last week at 83 years old. We had a great celebration of life. He had 7 grandkids who were all there at their funeral. So Uncle Richard, I hope you're watching this in heaven. Hope they have access to video and email. And I hope I'll get a comment from you via email. That would scare me out. Anyhow, for everybody else, thank you for indulging that minute. And as always, make today your best day ever.